What's up, everybody? All the listeners across the world and out there in the universe, thank you. Can't thank you guys enough. I'm going to say it again. Thank you for listening to the podcast, subscribing, doing all that stuff. And remember, you can find us on iTunes, subscribe, leave us some feedback. We'd love to hear what you think of the podcast. Android folks, or I also like to call them anti-Applers. That's totally a phrase and a word. Go to Google Play Music and subscribe. You find us on Stitcher, Podcast Addict, every podcast app that's out there you can think of. We're on there. Go to our YouTube channel, search us out, subscribe there. We also just added the podcast to iHeartRadio, so that's pretty kick-ass. If you haven't yet, make sure you check us out on Facebook as well. It's just the Energy is Love podcast on Facebook. In the next few weeks, we've got this really cool thing that's going to be happening. It's actually Saturday, July 30th to be exact. We're going to be recording at the 4th anniversary event for the Soulworks Fair. It's an amazing event that brings together some of the area's best professional healers, psychics, readers. We'll be there chatting everybody up, interviewing some of the professionals as well as some of the fair's guests. I'm really excited for that. I think it should be a lot of fun. It's going to be a new thing that we've done on the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to it. So keep an eye out for that episode, or better yet, come out to the fair and be on the podcast yourself. We'd love to chat with you and meet some of our listeners. Saturday, July 30th, 11 o'clock is when the fair starts, and it's at Dancing Crane Imports in Salt Lake City. The address is 673 East Simpson Avenue. You can find out more about the fair by going onto Facebook and searching out their page. It's Soulworks. It's all one word, Soulworks. Have you floated lately? What about relaxed in your own home float tent of wonder and amazement? No, you haven't? Well, Zen Float Company, online at zenfloatco.com, manufactures and sells the first in-home float tent. For those of you who don't know, a float tank, which you typically find in high-end spas and float centers, it's a $30,000 ginormous tub that you sit in and relax and float. It's absolutely amazing, but it's kind of expensive for the regular average person. So Zen Float now makes that easy and affordable. The tent that they manufacture is only $1,850. They're solidly built from stainless steel and canvas and are only 4 feet wide and 8 feet long, which gives you more than enough room to get inside and float, but makes it feasible to put it up in your house. The water is continuously heated by their radiant heating system, which allows you to float as long as you want. It also has a dual UV pump cleaning system, so your water stays nice and pure and pristine for each float. They ship their tents all over the world, plus the tent itself looks like a kick-ass pyramid, which makes your floating experience all that much better. Now they've made it so more people like you and me can lay back and experience the wonders of floating. Go to our Facebook page at Energy is Love Podcast and click on the link for Zen Float. Then, because you're a listener and a fan of the podcast, when you buy your tent and check out, make sure you enter the promo code Energy is Love and get a free pair of underwater headphones. Then you get a float and listen to the Energy is Love podcast while you're doing it. Amazing. We also have to thank DeBryman. He's been sponsoring small businesses for the past 10 years, and the podcast wouldn't be what it is today without the support from DeBryman. Be sure to contact us online. Go to our Facebook page. Email us at energyislovepodcast@gmail.com. If you're interested in being on the show, we'd love to have you. We'd love to chat. We'd love to learn more about you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a beautiful, wonderful day, and enjoy whatever episode is coming up next. Recently, I was a guest on The Spiritual Voice, which is a podcast hosted by Paul Cousineau, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I absolutely loved it. It was super cool to get a chat and visit with Paul. We talked about a lot of interesting things, but make sure you go out and find it. Paul's podcast is The Spiritual Voice, and it's available anywhere and everywhere. You can go on iTunes and subscribe and find the episode and listen to a little bit about me. It was kind of nice. It was really interesting. I'd like to thank Paul for that opportunity. But on today's show, on this episode of the Energy is Love podcast, the podcast for what? You know, the universe. My guest was Aron Stein. Aron is an incredible guy. We had never met before, and I loved getting the chance to sit down and talk with him. Aron's kind of spiritual journey and experiences in life have been really unique, I think. It was cool to get to learn about all the different aspects of things that he's done. Aron has spent time living in retreat Zen centers, essentially. I guess that's what we could call them, even though there's probably more specific names and ways to describe them. He actually, even for a time period in his life, considered becoming a monk and kind of devoting his life to that spiritual practice of finding the deep inside of himself. So Aron now works with clients. He has his own online courses that you can sign up for. He also talked about an ebook that he recently released that is available free online through his website, which is shiftcourses.com. So go find out all of his stuff. Go check out that ebook. Go check out his 9-week course that he has, kind of taking you through the chakra system, even though he approaches it in a different way, which he talks about. And I really think it's interesting. Enjoy, sit back, relax. Here we go.
You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is the Love podcast.
The Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is Love podcast.
The podcast for the universe.
The Energy is Love podcast.
What's up, everybody? Here we are again, Energy is Love podcast, brand new episode, and my guest today is Aron Stein. Aron, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Craig. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming out and being on the show. So really all we do is bullshit. We just talk. It's super laid back and easy. But I do have a question for you that I want to start off with, because I was doing a little bit of kind of research and reading up on you and everything like that. And if I'm not mistaken, at some point in your life, you lived at or went to or spent quite a bit of time at like a Zen retreat center. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah, I've actually lived at quite a few spiritual centers. Well, 3 total, so maybe not quite a few. But
3 is way more than me.
Yes. But the first place I spent most of my time practicing and training was the Kanzeon Zen Center, and that's like on the edge of downtown Salt Lake.
Yeah.
So it was like a really traditional Zen center, especially at first. But it was also an urban Zen center, so people often had jobs as well as their duties at the Zen center.
And what are some of the other places? You said that there were 3 of them.
Well, a bit over a year ago, I spent about 7 months living at a Tibetan retreat center. And that was in the wilderness refuge in Colorado in the mountains. And that was really wonderful because it was a authentic Tibetan temple with lamas and gurus who came and practiced and taught from all over the world. So I got to meet some really wonderful teachers from all over the world and learn some of the deeper energy and Buddhist practices that I had been.
How long were you there?
7 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So it got really cold in the winter. I had a little cabin in the mountains.
I bet.
I had some close encounters with bears and mountain lions. But
what part of Colorado was it?
It was down in Pagosa Springs. It was right on the edge of New Mexico.
Very nice.
So the whole town is on a geothermal hot springs. It's all geothermal heated. It's a pretty magical
Were there
place.
like hot springs and stuff at the center and at the place and everything?
All around, yeah.
That's way cool.
It's really a pretty amazing place.
What was your favorite place that you stayed at or that you went and lived at for a while?
It's hard to choose a favorite. It was really hard to come back into civilization from living in the mountains. You don't really sleep quite as good in this. You really don't sleep quite as good in the city, and there's just a lot of chaos and noise that you don't realize until it's gone.
Yeah.
How chaotic the world is that we live in. And so it could be really hard, but I think that's the really modern practice. Most of us can't go live in the mountains or at a monastery. And so how do we integrate these spiritual traditions with our own life?
With everyday life.
Yeah. How do we live in both worlds? And so that's kind of been the question, not only of my own life, but as these teachings start to become more and more revealed and integrated in the West, how do we do that? How do we become Western practitioners in a modern world?
That's a really good lead into whatever the heck we could talk about.
Absolutely.
But I want to know more first, because I'm going to remember that we come back to that, because that's I want to get your kind of ideas and your thoughts on all that concept and how we can implement our spiritual practices in the world that we live in today. Was there ever some part of you that wanted to just go do that and completely devote your life to living in some place like that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started practicing Zen, I was very close to being a monk, or at least practicing to being a monk. And we were supposed to create these little rakasu, and I had it started, but then my best friend Bruce, who was a monk, he passed away, and lots of things happened. And so I kind of started questioning, if that was really the path for me. And, even at the last place I wintered, there's a practice of taking a 3-year spiritual retreat to become, a teacher, or at least an official yogi. And so you actually do a 3-year silent retreat. And that's one of the things up there. That you have people up there who you've never met them. They're somewhere off in the mountains doing a 3-year retreat, and you just hope they're all right.
And they just go up there by themselves for 3 years?
Yeah, in a cabin. People bring them food, check in on them. But that's the practice, is really starting to go deep into your own self, your own energy.
And you didn't do that?
No, I didn't do that.
That's a big commitment.
It is a big commitment, and I totally would have done it. I was drawn to it, but I also sensed, like, in a sense, I've probably done it lifetimes before.
Yeah.
But in another sense, that's just not where I'm at. That's not my dharma or my karma in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's to, like we said, live in both worlds and integrate that into my own life.
Do you ever see those stupid things that get posted? I shouldn't say stupid, they're not stupid, but those silly things that'll get posted online where they'll show the picture of the secluded cabin or the really nice place on the beach, and there's like, would you go stay here without any? I'm like, you don't have to pay me. Like, I'll pay to go do that.
So much to do that. Absolutely.
I don't need $10,000 to be convinced to go do that. I'll give you $10,000 to let me go and live there for a month without any distractions.
Exactly.
So let's go back and talk about how do you, or what are some good ideas, I guess, or not even try to think of it this way. Like, you're not necessarily giving your spiel or you're out there, we have tons of listeners, and I think the coolest part of the show is that people just get different concepts and ideas, but I want your concepts and ideas, and I want your practices. So how do you find that balance between being drawn to that aspect of wanting to go live someplace for 3 years by yourself and really dive deep into who you are, but yet still participate in kind of the way society is ran and operating today?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I think there's a couple of levels to that question, obviously. Mm-hmm. From the level of somebody just getting started, I'd say it's just starting to find a practice that works for you and stick to it. And that will evolve over time. But initially, when we start awakening or moving onto the path, it's really about withdrawing and disconnecting from the matrix, which is whatever you want to call it. It could be your patterns and conditions. It could be just the chaotic world that we live in. But we have to somehow cut or separate ourselves from this lifetime of patterns that we've had.
Yeah.
And they're always being reinforced all around us. And so that's why I would say it's really important to kind of go on some kind of retreat, no matter how long it is. It could be a weekend, it could be a month, but just really learning to start to still your mind and be comfortable with yourself, perhaps for the first time, and discover who you really are. And once you do that, you realize there is so much more to you than you could possibly imagine. And so then, once you're kind of hooked into that, there's no turning back.
Yeah. Were you nervous about it when you? So when was the first one? Colorado wasn't the first,
right?
Was there an aspect of you that was kind of, when I say nervous, but like afraid of what you were going to find? Because you mentioned that a lot of times it would be the first time for somebody to go into a space like that.
Right. Well, for me, I first started this when I was a teenager, I guess. And so I was too dumb to know better. I was just all gung-ho. I'm like, yes, enlightenment. Let's go for it, no matter what it costs. And so my first real silent retreat was a desert retreat with Zen monks. And I really didn't know what I was getting into. And the first few days that you're on retreat, your mind is kind of like this chaotic little hamster running around in circles, and it doesn't really know what to do. And I found this for most people who go on retreat, even longtime practitioners. It's really hard the first few days to disconnect from the matrix and start to accept how much chaos and turmoil we have in our minds all the time. We're just not aware of that. But after a few days of silence, your mind will start to eventually give up. And that's when kind of the vast awareness, that big mind, starts to open up for us. And we can really start to experience not only our mind, but reality in a whole new way. And that's when the path really starts to open up, is when we silence the mind. But until we silence the mind, at least just for a little bit, you have no idea. It's just like watching the same television channel all the time.
Yeah. I don't think people realize how much chaos goes on continually in their head and in their brain. It just becomes such a normal operating procedure, really, where it's our regular everyday thought process that starts as soon as we wake and doesn't quit until we fall asleep. And it's exhausting. And I think that this is me personally. I didn't realize it until I started to try to meditate and start to try to do some different things and get into the whole spiritual practice of what was going to be me and my spiritual practice. And then now it's like when I am aware of the fact that it's still chaotic, because it is still chaotic, and I try to keep it, calm throughout the day and different things like that. But it's so overwhelming. Right. You know what I mean? Once you kind of have a taste of that peacefulness and that quietness that can come, then it's like, I don't know, it's just so hard. What do you do? Like, what do you find? Because I know I should say I know for a fact, but I'm assuming that yours is still kind of, because it's just such a normal way to process. Our brains are constantly working and going.
Right. Well, I have the benefit of practicing for a long time, so my mind is probably a little bit different. And I do forget, especially working with introductory students, how much turmoil there is in the mind. But that's why we do the mind training, because after a while that does start to change. And you will have emotions and, chaotic thoughts, even when you're an enlightened being. But it's less like this constant barrage of firecrackers going off. Yeah. And like the scared little hamster. It's more like ocean waves, and the hamster learns how to surf.
I like that. That's a good metaphor.
And so you'll still go up and down, but now at least you're having some control over it. And you never have control over the ocean, that vast sea of awareness that's deep down. But you learn how to navigate it.
I think, that's beautiful what you just described. And it makes me think about the times that I've gone to the ocean. And you definitely have, even just standing where you can look out and, the waves are kind of lapping at your feet or something like that. And it's immense. It's incredibly powerful. And you feel completely, at least for me, I feel completely overwhelmed. But then at the same time, when you're standing in those waves and in the water and in the movement of it, you just really have that, that really peaceful sense of being one with it.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're not designed to be in the chaos of the daily world. We're designed to be in nature. And I think all of my deepest spiritual experiences have been in nature. And most of these traditions, from Tai Chi to Zen to Tibetan Buddhism, nature is involved in some way. And when you connect with that, you're connecting to a deeper part of yourself. And when we get disconnected from nature, we get disconnected from ourselves.
Why do you think, throughout time and history and everything like that, why do you think we have become so distant from it? Do you think that it's some part of divine plan and everything like that? Or I'm sure that there's an aspect of that, but why? I don't know. I think about that sometimes, because it is so ingrained in us. Everybody likes being outdoors. Everybody likes being in nature. And I think everybody, even if they're not spiritual or anything like that, they feel it. But yet somehow we've distanced ourselves from it so greatly.
Well, why would people be resistant to going out into nature? Yeah. So that's the first thing to look at. Do you know anyone who really is like, oh, nature? No.
Yeah, I do. So a lot of people like that.
So that's actually more common. We tend to think oh, everybody loves nature, but that's not actually true. Most of the world doesn't love nature. Yeah. Especially, people I've known who kind of grew up in nature. A lot of them, they're just nature's kind of terrifying. Nature loves you, but it also kind of wants to eat you. Yeah. And so I think that's where we start. If we're looking at the why from an evolutionary perspective, why would we separate ourselves from nature? The first level is always fear, and it's security. And so that's what we've been doing, for 100,000 years, is becoming more secure just so we can survive. And by separating ourselves from nature, especially traditionally, it's a lot safer, right? Because, big things aren't going to eat us, and we aren't going to go off and wander off and get lost by ourselves. And so it's our most primal instinct to stay in a tribe, stay disconnected from the natural world, and just be safe.
I think that's where it kind of originated and it's kind of stemmed from as evolution took over and people
absolutely.
progressed.
Well, look at it now. We're afraid of the outside world. We're afraid of Muslims. We're afraid of terrorists. We're afraid of the other, and we want to build a wall around us and stay safe from the other.
Yeah.
And even if it's just imaginary, we still have this primal fear to be safe at any cost. And so it's not that people like Donald Trump, but he's just the biggest, baddest alpha that they can find. And he's going to keep them safe. He's going to build a wall around them. He's going to take care of his tribe. And that's his message. And it's actually a really profound message because he's tapping into a primal archetype. People don't look past it for the problems. They just want to be safe.
Yeah.
And so whenever you wonder why people are motivated, most of the time they just want to be safe.
That's a good point. Do you think Trump's going to be our next president?
I do. I do.
It's kind of a scary thought. We don't have to dive all the way into politics, but it's kind of a scary thought, I think, And then there's another aspect of me that I think about, in my lifetime, how many presidents I've seen and, as a child and as a teenager and stuff like that, you're not necessarily you're not interested in politics and the way that the world works and everything like that. But I think for the most part, my life and my everyday life and the way that I move through life isn't going to be affected or changed in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
If Trump's president.
Yeah, people get caught up, and it's part of the distraction. It's part of the matrix to keep us distracted from what's really going on, and really ultimately to keep us distracted from looking within ourselves.
Yeah.
And what part of us doesn't like people like Donald Trump? What part of us lives in fear? What part of us is afraid of the other? And so when we start to look at that in ourselves, that's when you can really start to change the world.
So you keep talking about the matrix.
Yeah.
I want to talk about it some more.
Let's do that.
So describe it to me. Describe to me what you're talking about, because there's going to be people out there that are listening that think you're talking literally about the
movie,
The Matrix, and that whole concept and idea and the basis of that movie.
Well, I'm a bit of a sci-fi geek. So
it's a good movie.
Yeah, I apologize to people who, don't like Star Wars or Matrix references, and to those who do, you're welcome, because I'm going to use them.
Well, you're on the right podcast, because I saw The Matrix 12 times back when it came out.
I love it. And The Matrix is a metaphor, and the Wachowski sisters now, which is wonderful.
Yes.
Very beyond duality. They've both transitioned into women. The whole theme of it was to move beyond duality. The Matrix was a way to keep people separate, literally in little pods, isolated, and that was the safest thing. And in a sense, humans created the Matrix to keep them safe. And so even though it's like this idea of this war against machines are just as natural as anything else in the natural environment. On a deeper level, the Matrix is the illusion. And that's what we saw, is that people would jack into the Matrix, and then they would wake up and they would realize, oh, even all this stuff that seems substantial and real, it's just a perception of my mind. And so from a yogic or Buddhist point of view, it's not that we live in an illusion, it's that our perceptions of the world are not accurate. People can see the exact same thing and have completely different reports of what happened. And so it's our perceptions that create everything that we see around us, and it creates how we interpret it. And so that would be the mind or the controller that's doing that, which is great because we need to categorize and interpret things, or else we wouldn't know the difference between a poisonous plant or a fierce animal that wanted to eat us and something that was benign. So we can't just be one with everything, at least in the real world.
Yeah.
That said, the Matrix does cause all sorts of suffering and all sorts of problems and chaos, because we take it to be real. We take it all to be real. And we don't understand that we don't have these things in our lives happening to us. We're co-participants in everything that's happening around us. And we have so much potentiality to start to shift them by shifting our perspective. And so I know that you've probably gone into a room and it just felt dark and heavy, right? And someone felt dark or heavy. But just by shifting your perspective, you were able to shift the vibrational energy in that room, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And that happens all the time. Or the opposite, somebody's like in a great mood, you're like, what is wrong with you? And we take them down a level. And so that's how we shift the matrix, is on an emotional level. But on an emotional level, energy is actually going on. Energy is essentially everything that's around us. Everything is made of energy, at least on the quantum level. And it's ever changing. It's in constant flux. And so the mind, the ego mind, it wants to hold on to something substantial, right?
Something they can kind of tangible.
Yeah, because it's terrifying to the mind that nothing is permanent. Everything is changing. Nothing is solid. And so it wants to pretend that things can be held onto, grasped onto, be it a relationship, be it, their sense of safety. It's all an illusion. We know that cognitively, right? Everything is changing. But the mind is so desperate to bring some meaning and pattern and order to a chaotic world that it will do anything to create this illusion. And it literally creates a whole entire illusion around itself to keep it safe. So it's building this energetic wall around it. And so the concept of building a wall is really profound right now, because that is our shadow. That is our unconscious fears manifesting. And it's only when someone like a Donald Trump comes up that our shadows come up, and then we can start to change it.
Yeah, it's challenging. Have you seen, because you mentioned the Wachowskis, have you seen their, I don't know if it's their most latest thing that they've done, but it was a series on Netflix.
Sense8.
Yeah, did you watch that?
Yeah, it's amazing, because it's these, it's not for everybody.
It's different, yeah.
Yeah, but it's these sensitive empaths who are able to transfer their consciousness between each other.
Yeah, it's nuts.
It moves beyond the level of duality. And that is like a really profound yogic lesson. If you look at the series, there's a lot of yogic symbolism and things like that. But literally, once we become free of the matrix, and this is kind of going to some advanced concepps.
That's fine.
Okay. According to yogic traditions, we can actually transfer our consciousness, in many shamanic traditions. And this is actually very real, and you can learn how to transfer your consciousness, not just between other things, but other objects, and expand your awareness beyond your limiting sense of self. And you can literally start to experience other people's emotions, other people's thoughts, other people's sense of self. And it's really fascinating, because we realize our limited sense of self is not only keeping us trapped, but it's keeping us from connecting to other people on the most intimate way. And Martin Luther King said that once we really understand our enemy, they stop becoming our enemy, and they become our friend. And the only way we can do that is move out of fear and learn to love each other. And it's not that it's this warm, fuzzy thing. It's just letting go of what's keeping us from connecting. The heart chakra is really about connecting with nature, connecting with each other,
yourself,
connecting with ourselves. And so in a sense, we're all interconnected in this dynamic fabric of life. We just don't know it, because we create these artificial walls around us.
Yeah.
But once we can remove the walls, when we said, seek not for love, just seek all the barriers you put against it, then you move into something extraordinary. And this is a broader sense of self, and an understanding that on some level we're all interconnected. On some level we do share the same collective mind, and we can tap into it, and we can experience each other on a way that's just as real as experiencing ourselves.
When my wife and I watched that series, it was one of those that we ended up kind of binge watching, and that's kind of the cool thing about Netflix. But I loved it because it had so many different. First off, it was just cool to see because it has a lot of really unique characters in it that you don't typically see portrayed on the screen. And so that was really neat. And then all the different ideas and aspects that they were talking about. And I thought that it was done really well. I think they're going to have a second season. But do you think that anytime that there's ever been any sort of portrayal in, not any time, I'm sure there's something out there, but any time that some of these concepts and ideas, whether it's spiritual, all of these kind of esoteric, metaphysical kind of things, when they're portrayed in the media, when they're portrayed in movies or television shows or things like that. So like Ghost Whisperer is a good example, right? She's just a medium, and it's portrayed in a certain light because it has to be sensationalized. And I thought about that in regards to Sense8 in that whole series, where there was an aspect of it that was kind of sensationalized, but then I really kind of think that a lot of the things that went on and took place in that series totally, real and practical in a sense. Right. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think they're able to look at the deeper aspects. I think films like The Matrix and even Sense8, it gets caught up in the sensationalism and the action scenes. But it's interesting because, one, they understand we are in a primitive survival mindset for the most part, and our minds are going to be drawn to that kind of dynamic. But two, they said about the Matrix series, why there's so much violence is this is the violence that we do to ourselves all the time. This is the violence that we do to our own emotions, our own minds. And this is the violence that we do to each other on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And so whether or not we're literally attacking each other, in a sense, we always feel like we're being attacked. And in another sense, we're also attacking each other. Not because we're mean-spirited. It's just that as long as you're in a place of fear, you're going to naturally lash out at each other. And you can
trying to protect yourself.
Yeah. And even the Dalai Lama, if he is experiencing anger, it's still going to be an energy of attack that's coming out.
I love all the stuff that they do.
Yeah,
they're
great.
One of the, like when I see something come out with that, something that has their stamp on it, whether they wrote it or directed or anything like that. One of their other, and we're going to sit here and talk about movies and TV shows for a while, but that's fine. Cloud Atlas. Did you see that one?
I did. I love that as well.
That one was super good.
And that got into the reincarnation aspect,
yeah,
which is really cool because we keep getting drawn back to the same patterns and the same kind of stories over and over again. And you don't have to believe in reincarnation to understand that's true in our own lives, that we kind of bring in the same relationships, the same situations over and over again until we can break that karmic pattern.
Yeah, until we can learn and expand outside of it.
Yeah.
See, I'm sitting there just thinking about, I loved Cloud Atlas. It was done so beautifully in the way that they did it and everything like that. But I'm going to sit here and ponder it for a while.
Yeah. And I think a cool theme of that was there was always a villain in it in every lifetime. And that was like the archetype of the primal fear, and that archetype feeds on fear. It feeds on violence. And even towards the end, that archetype won, I think. And so you can't fight it. You can't fight the kind of shadow.
Yeah.
But when you understand that archetype is in all of us, this fear, this violence, then you can go in and start to make friends of it and start to transform it.
I have a question for you because it's making me think. So what do you think in regards to kind of that archetype or that fear or, your shadow side, whatever we want to call it or reference it as? Do you think that you ever completely evolve away from it? Or is it just kind of a symbiotic relationship that you eventually learn to work in conjunction with it? Because there's an aspect of it that's always going to be there in some way, shape, or form.
Right. Well, as you work with it, it does evolve. When the Buddha first became enlightened, Mara, the archetype of fear and illusion, came to him. And Mara was this big, fearful demon. And Mara was trying to talk the Buddha into stop looking within, come back out, get distracted, become a king, have all the riches and women you want. And the Buddha was like, no, I'm good. I've had all that. I've seen its It's always changing. It's not substantial. I want to find the true truth. But Mara kept tempting him until the Buddha realized that this was an aspect of him, and he was fine with it. In fact, all of these things were just aspects of him. All of these thoughts, all of these ideas, all these stories, they were just parts of him. And as soon as he just realized that, embraced them, and kind of let them go, then he woke up. He woke up from this illusion that he'd been living his whole life, even as a yogi, that there was something out there that would save him, that would save everybody. And he realized the only way to be free of suffering is to let go of that illusion, our attachment to it. And so you can never really be free of the illusion, but you can be free of the attachment. As soon as he did that, he became awake to this expanded mind we were talking about. And he went back into the world, and people saw him glowing, and they said, well, who are you? Are you a man? He said, no, I don't necessarily identify with a man. And he said, are you God? He said, no. He said, well, what are you? You're like nothing we've experienced. He said, I'm awake. I'm awake. And so that's all the Buddha means, is the awakened one.
Yeah.
And later in the Buddha's life, Mara would continue to come back, and everybody would be like, oh my God, there's Mara coming to see the Buddha. And they would try to keep Mara at bay. And Mara would say, oh, you think the Buddha has enemies? What is wrong with you people? And the Buddha and Mara would join like old friends, and they would actually hug each other in this kind of hugging meditation. It was really beautiful. And so the Buddha and Mara became friends, and they were friends their whole life. So that shadow is always going to be there. But by embracing it, it stops becoming a shadow, an enemy, and becomes our ally.
So I like what you said about kind of that attachment to it.
It's
and
the
just letting
attachment.
go of it.
Yeah, yeah. And so the negative emotions are always going to come up. We're always going to have the shadow come up. It's endless. If we think we're perfect, enlightened, spiritual, love and light beings, we may have some work to do. Evidence may be that we're still here.
Yeah.
As long as we're still here, you may have some work to do.
Yeah. I love people that, whether they feel like they've reached that pinnacle point in their life spiritually and they're so enlightened and everything like that. I think there was an aspect on my own personal journey too, where I thought, man, I'm just doing so good. Everything's going so well, and my meditations are amazing, and all these different aspects where I just felt my vibration kind of continually rising and doing really, really well. Mm-hmm. And then sure enough, it was like, nope.
Yep.
You kind of drop back down to reality and realize, I still have more work to do. I still have more progression to do. And
right. Yeah.
That really helped me in the concept of the idea that it's just practice.
Yeah.
Just that continual practicing of all these different things.
And how did you get to that realization that it's just practice?
It came through a lot of hardship. It
Right.
came through a lot of difficult times and experiences where, my faith and my beliefs were tested. Mm-hmm. And that's, literally just kind of how it happened, where it was like I had to go through quite a bit of stuff, whether you want to, explain it or describe it as kind of shedding away and burning away of different things and really diving deep into that shadow stuff. And every time I would go deep, it just seemed like it was an endless well that it would go deeper and deeper and deeper. And so it was really just the realization of, I'm human, and that's a beautiful thing, and we make mistakes, and rather than looking at it as a mistake or looking at it as kind of success or failure, it was just the practice. I was just going to get the opportunity to wake up and practice being alive and being human and Beautiful. Life itself every single day.
Yeah.
And so, but it's a practice.
Yeah. I agree. And the Dalai Lama said our job isn't to, figure out the meaning of life or the universe. It's just to show up in our life and, be kind to ourselves and other people.
Yeah.
And that's the practice. It's just to practice. And it's a constant practice because it doesn't come naturally,
I think it does, I think it does come naturally. I think that if you take somebody and, well, I don't know, because now I'm thinking it's like, I think if you take somebody and all the experiences that happen to us from the time that we're born, obviously mold and shape, and they're an important aspect of who we are and who we end up to be. But I think that there's always some part of us that is so naturally inclined to be in bounds.
Right.
That, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just getting back to that point.
Yeah, and that part of it is natural. Like that's our natural state,
Mm-hmm.
is to be free of this suffering. But as long as we're in the world of the illusion, the matrix, that's not natural.
Yeah.
Because we live in an unnatural world.
Do you long for, because I think sometimes, I know I do this personally, but I've talked to other people too, where it's like do you long to have an experience, or do you like, is there an aspect of you that wishes there was, only 1,000 people on the planet and life was much simpler and much easier and much quieter?
Well, have you ever been in a spiritual community where people thought they were like the best?
I haven't.
Okay. Every spiritual community I've been a part of, there's always a shadow. So you can take the most enlightened 1,000 people in the world, and shit's still going to come up.
It's still going to be there.
Yes. And in fact, that shadow is even going to be stronger. And in Zen, they call that the stink of Zen, is where you're like, yes, I've made it, I'm enlightened, and I don't have a shadow. Well, that just creates an even bigger shadow.
Yeah.
You don't have a shadow. And so even if we do manage to move beyond our shadow, which is unlikely, then there's another shadow to face. Because if it's true that we're all connected, then we still have to work with the shadows and sufferings of other people.
That's very true.
And so that would be why enlightened beings might possibly come back. They would be called bodhisattvas. And so it's not about doing their own work. It's about helping other people with their suffering and shadows. Because ultimately, if we are all connected, there's no end. There's no escape. There's no point where we're just like, I made it. Now I'm free of samsara and I go to, the pure land or go to heaven and just be blissful and one with everything. Because even in the Pure Land, there's still going to be these Buddhas who are experiencing the suffering, these wisdom beings who experience the suffering of the earth. And so there's no escape. There's no escape.
You think we're connected, though, don't you? Like, personally, you think that we're all connected?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to escape it?
You can, sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do. Yeah, depending on the day.
See, I think even, because for me, too, I think that even in the shittiest times, even in the most suffering, I always try to relish those emotions and those feelings as well.
Yeah.
Because there's some aspect of it that I think it's all just energy in the end, and I want as much energy as I can kind of grasp and hold on to at any given point.
That's the good stuff, though. I mean, once we understand that's just the grist for the mill, and that's where we get our transformation. It's not like being a yogi in the mountains. It's about being in the muck and like in the trenches and doing the work. So as much as it's nice to be in the mountains, eventually you have to come down again.
Is that part of the reason why you kind of chose not to do the whole 3-year seclusion thing?
Right. I mean, it was just very apparent that there's no escaping, and even if I was this blissful yogi in the mountains, I would still be experiencing the suffering of people, even if I didn't talk to them. I would still have this draw back to the world. And it's a very tangible thing. Like, you don't get to escape. Nobody gets to escape.
Yeah. Do you want to, do you have plans to do anything like that in the near future again? Or something?
Every year I'll do retreats and things like that. I just did a retreat a few months ago for, a week. And I think that's important to disconnect, but also reconnect. And so it's not about escaping. It's become being more graceful and embracing all the parts and kind of dancing between them. And so there's no perfect enlightened staged. And even in the chakras, and these are levels of awareness in us, there's the enlightened levels, and then there's the basic survival levels. Sometimes you got to be in that survival level.
Yeah.
Sometimes something, wants to eat you, or you have a near miss in traffic, and you got to be able to click in to that survival scenario where nothing else matters but you at that point. But the beauty, the grace, is being able to shift between these different levels of awareness. Kind of like in Sense8, they were able to shift between different people's skills, different people's emotions, and levels of awareness. And that's what I think is the real mastery. And so not being stuck in any one state, no matter how perfect, but being able to shift between all of them.
What's the craziest thing that you've ever experienced in, because my guess is, especially if you was the one in Colorado, the 7-month-long one, was that the longest time that you'd ever gone to a retreat or distance yourself from regular society?
It was a little bit different because I was still a director there, and I was working with volunteers and managing people. I got my evenings off, and I love that, just meditating and practicing the different practices. in the Zen tradition, we would do like a couple month silent retreats. And I think after the first few weeks, perhaps there's not as much benefit other than people just get tired of sitting for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And so I think Huxley said at some point, if you get the message, hang up the phone.
That's a good.
Yeah. And you got to play in the real world. Now, that said, there's always another level. There's always another level of practice you can do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not about developing cities or magical powers. It's really about being skillful and being able to shift between different things so that you can help other people.
Yeah.
And benefit everybody and not become this powerful spiritual person, but just say, hey, this might help you get unstuck. And that's all. So everything we do, at least in my traditions, is for the benefit of all beings, so that we don't get stuck in our idea of being spiritual or being better or anything like that. We're just a being. We're not even a spiritual being, because everything is spirit.
Yeah.
We're just a being in the world trying to survive and trying to help other people.
That's a good way to boil it down, because in the end, I think you're right. I think that's all that we really are here.
Yeah.
Do you think you know your purpose in life? Do you feel like you've come to it as far as?
Yeah. I mean, why I'm here is to help other people, because ultimately I'm selfish and I don't like to experience suffering, even other people's suffering.
Yeah.
So nothing we do is really altruistic, even though we like to think it is. But yeah, it's to help other people become more free. And then maybe together we can help more and more people. And then we can raise the collective consciousness so that humanity can go to that next level.
Yeah.
And from Michio Kaku is a quantum theorist. Have you heard of him?
No.
And he talks about...
What's his name again?
Michio Kaku. And he has a theory about civilizations. And then, so there's the type 1 civilization, which is basically moving into the stars. We're kind of on the edge of that. And so like a type 1.5 would be Star Trek, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're more on the Star Wars type, where there's still lots of wars. It's not very peaceful.
Yeah.
These movies are really reflections of where we are. So I honestly doubt like a Star Wars type civilization would have survived because they still have as much stuff as we do.
Yeah.
And then a type 2 civilization, you start really harnessing, the power of the sun, the power of planets, the gravitational fields, and you're really free. You're kind of in these crown chakras. You're free of not just suffering, but you're free of, the basic laws of physics.
Yeah.
And those would be what would be called maybe wisdom beings in different traditions, ascended masters, things like that. And then there's a level beyond that, which we don't need to go into, because we're not even a type 1 civilization. We're like a type 0.5. We're trying to get to a type 1 civilization. And that's where we really need to be just to survive. His theory is that most civilizations never reach type 1 status because they just blow themselves up.
Kind of implode before they get to that point.
Yeah. But that's the process of evolution, is nature keeps creating and destroying until finally something's sustainable. And right now we're not sustainable. We're not in harmony. All we got to do is get more sustainable, more in harmony, and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch with nature. And that's kind of a big abstract thing. But from a personal point of view, that's what we're trying to do too, right? Is just survive. Most people don't even have that down. I have a hard time just getting through the day sometimes. And become more balanced in our lives, more sustainable, and more connected. Just a little bit. You don't have to be a lot. There's not like this high, lofty goal. It's just about staying one step ahead of evolution, one step ahead of the universe before it kicks your ass.
Yeah.
As long as you're one step ahead, you're fine. But as long as we get complacent, like, oh, I'm fine. I can play Pokemon Go tonight. No big deal. Yeah. I'm getting outside at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how that's the benefit that everybody's talking about.
Yes.
Like they're
At
like
least people get outside.
Yeah, at least they're out walking. Well, just go for a walk for hell's sakes.
I know. My partner and I, we're playing it, and for the first day it was fun. And then we went up to Red Butte Garden, which is this amazing botanical garden. We saw all these people in this amazing place they've never been, just looking for Pokemon through their screens. And there's like these bird of paradise flowers and amazing, amazing things. And pretty quickly, my girlfriend was like, "This is terribly wrong. This is so wrong." And so we started like capturing Pokemon on our cell phones, like butterflies, like ducks. And like the technology, the way is already out there if we just understand that we're a part of it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. I had a thought and I completely lost me because you distracted me with Pokemon.
Everybody gets distracted with Pokemon.
I haven't played it yet.
No, I had a friend. Well, you should. You should play it just to understand. It's not that fun.
Yeah.
But I had a friend in California, and just by his house, 2 people fell off a cliff playing Pokemon.
Really?
They were okay, but how do you do that? I don't know. It's beautiful because that brings up her shadow, which shows us that even if we're in the world, we're not in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it shows us that we're continually in this matrix. And Pokemon just shows us how much so.
I think it has a lot of potential I think it's got a lot of potential for good in a sense. I think that technology, that the way that they've been able to harness and incorporate so many different aspects into just that one silly game. And I think there's a lot of potential for good in that. Yeah. But then at the same time, you can just see that thing snowballing into chaos.
Right.
And so I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, the Native Americans said that, I don't know which Native Americans, that's kind of like racist. According to Native Americans, it's like people who talk about this one African tribe.
Yeah.
And like, oh God, that's really racist. Someone said somewhere that everything could be medicine, everything could be poison. You just have to know how to use it. And so you can't disown the technology because that's as much a part of nature as everything. But how do we use it? How do we transform even these shadow things into something that can help us evolve and transform?
That's what I was going to ask you. I remember, do you feel like not just our culture, our society, the world population, do you feel like we're headed towards that kind of implosion of destruction? Or do you feel like we've been able to steer it a little bit to where we're going to be able to pull out of it?
Yeah, I don't think it's an either or question because there will always be life.
Yeah.
Something will always survive. It's just how enlightened or even how comfortable do we want to be on this planet?
For sure.
And in a sense, I think we've already imploded. You know, we're constantly at war with each other and with our environment. Will there be a tipping point? You know, probably in another 100 years if we don't evolve. But you have to kind of believe that the good will always outweigh the bad, and it usually does. You know, even if we go into the darkest times in our human history, eventually we come out. So there may be a long dark time coming up, probably.
We could be in it right now and not even realize it.
Yeah, we don't even realize it. According to yoga traditions, we're in the Kali Yuga era, which is the darkest time in the world.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it though, right? You look outside, everything's bright, everything's shiny, Pokemon are everywhere, they're cute.
But that's all we've known.
Yeah, that's the most seductive, is not understanding that we're in a prison because it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Because everything's so shiny. And so I believe that the greatest darkness hides in the light. The greatest darkness really does hide in light. That can be in people, that can be in the world. And you know, look at Rome. It was the biggest, brightest beacon of freedom, democracy, and you know, just hope for the world. It was also the darkest entity because it was going around, you know, killing and subjugating everybody to their own democracy, trying to free the world and bring them Roman democracy. The Roman Empire never ended. It just evolved.
Evolved into something different each time.
Yes. And, you know, it was a republic with representatives just like America is. So I'm not political, but you just see like...
There's a lot of parallels.
Yeah, nothing ever dies. It just evolves.
Yeah.
And it's been the same thing, and we're up against the same things thousands and thousands of years ago.
Yeah. I got a challenging question for you. It's kind of a silly question, but it's kind of challenging. It might make you think for a minute. If you had the ability, we're just going to suspend any sort of like belief system or understanding of the way the universe spins and works and all the dynamics to it and everything like that. But if you, Aron, had the ability to pick like maybe 2 or 3 things, we'll make it easy. We'll just go 2 things. And these 2 things, these 2 changes that you were going to implement were going to be worldwide. We're going to be sustaining. They weren't going to be half-assed changes that kind of worked for a week and then failed. But there were going to be 2 things that you could do to alter and shift the planet permanently towards a more balanced, happy, well-being kind of state. What would those 2 things do or be?
I don't know. Do you have 2 things?
No, I just thought it was a good question.
It's a good question.
I'd have to think on it for a while.
All right. Well, you have to come up with 2 things too. If I have to come up with 2 things.
Okay, let's each come up with one. We'll make it easy.
We'll come up with one. All right. One thing for a more sustainable world. Is that the question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Not necessarily sustainable, but if we're thinking about the world as this kind of dark place, and we want to bring light, so we want to, whether it's end war and that's a cheat there. We're not just going to end war, because this is going to be something that you would implement to kind of raise and shift the consciousness and the vibration in a positive way for the planet.
Yeah. Well, talking about apps, it'd be really cool to have an app. It'd be really cool to have an app where people could see what's going on with their energy and just hold it up and be like, oh, wow, that darkness is there, or oh, that light is there. And you can really see what's going on, because we can't see our own reflections like other people do. We can't hear our own voice. We can't perceive, certainly, our energy as it really is.
Yeah.
And I think that would change everything. That would give people an awareness of how they look, because just hearing your voice kind of changes something in your brain, right? For the first time, or seeing yourself on YouTube or on a video, you're like, oh, that expands my awareness. In studies, they show monkeys themselves for the first time, and at first they don't understand that's not them and their reflection. They don't have this ability, but after a while they start to expand their awareness and understand, oh, okay, that's me. And they might start grooming themselves. They might start doing things that make them more aware of what's going on around them. So anything that allows us to become more aware, especially of our energy, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be a cool app.
Because negative karma isn't negative. It's just the result of unconsciousness. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
So as we become more conscious of what's going on, we can generate more positive karma. So people with bad karma, they didn't do bad things in a past life or even this life. They just weren't aware of what they're doing. Like, does anybody who, becomes addicted or smokes a cigarette really have an understanding of what they're doing when they first start doing that? No, it's all unconscious. And they keep doing the same unconscious pattern over and over again. And so that creates negative karma.
Yeah.
It's not that they're bad people. It's not that they deserve it. It's just unconscious. So there's an app for that someday.
My vote. This is my option or my choice. I would alter and shift and change so this is things that are just going to happen, right? I'm going to manifest it, and suddenly the world's going to shift and change this way in a permanent fashion. I would change education and the way that, and not just in the United States, but across the board. And so you see so many different things where, the things that kids are learning today and the way that kids are taught today, I think has to change significantly. And I would much rather have an education system in place where children learn about connecting to the earth and energy and all these different aspects of kind of these things that we not take for granted, but some of these things that we know, and that, that's what I would do, is change the education system across the planet so that it would be like soul and mind and body centered. And then we would still have some of the other aspects that we could incorporate into it. So we would still have mathematics and reading and, all those other type of things as well. But we would be teaching those in such a different way, in such a different fashion. And then the core of our education system would be healing ourselves and each other and the planet.
I love it. Yeah, and I think that's really where it starts, is educating people. And that, like we said, if you have more consciousness, there's more light in the world.
Yeah.
Become enlightened. You are awakened.
Do you have kids?
I don't. No.
See, I always think, because my wife and I, we've got 4 kids together, and I'm like, I wish we could have raised them from the beginning
Yeah.
with the belief system and the kind of the practices that we have now, and see what they would be like. Not that my kids aren't amazing. They are terrors at times, but
Sure.
it would be incredible to kind of see a child that was born and brought up in that way and taught and educated that way.
Yeah, I agree. And that's really the solution, probably on a bigger scale. As people become more educated, they have more sustainable families. They're in less fear of the other. And it just solves everything as you start to educate. But educate in a way that promotes consciousness rather than unconsciousness. And that's what our education does, is people get into little boxes and they just shut off the world and study and memorize and become unconscious.
Yeah. I think those are both good ones.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like it too. I don't know. The app's maybe a little bit more doable, but yours is a better idea.
It's one that'll take quite a bit of manifesting.
Yes. But that's where we start. And, with my nieces and nephews, it's, I get to be a part-time parent, which is nice.
Yeah.
Because I get with them when they're awesome and they think I'm awesome. But my Zen master said, maybe it's too late for us, but we can work on the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And primarily I work with like teachers and healers or people who aspire to, and now more and more kids, because I see that's where you can get the most, bang for your energy buck.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what you do.
Okay.
So give me a good idea. Because I know what you do, but I'm kind of cheating.
Yeah. So I even when it's unintentional and I just have workshops, I find that people who are really on the path, or teachers and healers, are drawn to me, and they just want to figure out how to get that next level.
Yeah.
They know they're on their path. It's just what's next, or why am I stuck? Because I've done all this work and I've practiced so hard and I'm such a spiritual person. But why is everything so shitty?
Yeah.
And it's not always that extreme, but usually we will get to a point in life where we just feel really stuck before we can change. Or they just know they aren't living up to their full potential and want to know how to get there. So that's what I do. And I'll help them just figure out where they're stuck and how to get to where they want to go. And that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
How we do that, it can be, you reach into the tool bag and do it. But I will usually direct people to either working with me individually or a 9-week online course I have, which goes through the chakra system. And I use it a little different. It's not like these abstract energies in the body. They're actually levels of awareness we have inside of us. And we talked a little bit about that, starting with survival, going all the way up to enlightenment or connection with God. And it's a map. It's a map of your own evolution. It's a map of human evolution. And it's all inside of us. We just were never given it. And so it's really cool because people can start to work through these different levels and realize, oh, that's where I've been stuck. I've been stuck in fear, or I've been stuck in not having a strong sense of self.
Yeah.
Maybe I've been stuck up here in the enlightened chakras and not wanting to go back down. And so we all have that. And no matter who we are in the world, we all have the same basic drives. We all have the same basic needs. And we all get stuck in the same places. I think I probably work with teachers and healers most because they're willing to do the work. They have some discipline. And
I think that's the biggest part.
yeah,
People will come and, whether it's sitting down before somebody that does energy work or cards or whatever the case may be, but they really have to have that commitment to wanting change,
Right.
and be willing to do it.
yeah,
Because you're not magical. You might be, Gandalf, but you still can only do things
Exactly.
temporarily in a sense, and it has to be the person.
yeah. I tell people it seems like magic, but it's not. It's
Yeah.
not. It's mostly hard work. Practice is 90% of it. 10% of it is a theory and technique. So it's mostly practice. And that's something, even I struggle with, is staying on a strong practice schedule every day. But when I do, everything's easy. But sometimes we just need a guide or someone to inspire us and say, hey, here's the next level. And working with teachers and healers is great because we don't have to change everybody. We just have to change a small percent of the people who are inspired to help other people become free. and it said 10% of the population. So we don't have to change the world, just 10%. And that's the tipping point.
That's a good way to look at it. I'd never thought of it that way.
Yeah. And
Because
so
obviously those people are going to go out and use that and inspire and do the change.
Yeah. So everybody who signs up to my course is either a teacher or has to kind of commit to that, because you're never going to really learn without a level of selflessness, without doing it for other people. Even if it's in the back of your mind, someday I'm going to apply these tools and help other people. Mm-hmm. If it's all about us and working through our own trauma, it just gets yucky and we get stuck. But what I found is, like, when, even before every practice, if we're like, feel that we're doing it for the benefit of all beings, or even just a few beings close to us, then that makes it much more powerful, right? Because you'll do so much more for other people than yourself. You'll do way more for your kids than you would ever for yourself. For sure. So it just creates so much more power.
Why do you think, because that's a weird dynamic, how we will always do more for other people than we will for ourselves. And we always think less of ourselves than we do of other people. And we always speak, like, our internal dialogue, our internal kind of self-speak and talk is always way more negative than we would ever say to anybody else. So we might talk poorly about somebody else, or, think this or think that about somebody else, but we always think way darker stuff about ourselves.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah. Well, on the deepest level, we don't really like ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the deepest level. And it's the fear that I'm not good enough, right? The fear that no matter how hard I try, it's never going to be enough. On a deeper level, it's a fear that I'm unlovable, probably. For most of us, that's what I found. And why does that come into play? Well, because we never established the first basic needs of survival and then just feeling safe and loved. Very few of us had perfect parents who made us feel completely safe and loved.
Yeah.
And so unless we learn how to give that to ourselves, then we're going to be stuck.
It's a good point. You got a lot of really good points.
Thanks.
Tell me what... I'm pissed because we have to wrap up and I don't want to wrap up. How can people find you? How can people get your information?
I just created a new ebook. It's called Soul Force, and it really gets into this yogic path of evolution and how, Gandhi called it the path of soul force, and Martin Luther King adopted it, and it's really the path of love and truth. So we can't just all be in the heart chakra and all love. We have to balance that with truth and wisdom. And how really that's the only way to survive and evolve. So that's a free ebook to your listeners. Just go to shiftcourses.com and you can click that download link.
And you'll be able to download it there.
Yeah. I'm also teaching some yoga classes in Salt Lake at Yoga Sune.
Are you a yoga instructor?
I am a yoga instructor.
Very cool.
Yeah. And so you've got to have both. You have to have the mind body, I've found. Even as I'm resisting that as I get older. I was driving up and I was thinking, man, I'm kind of sore. And I was looking at the martial arts gym. I was thinking, I used to do that, but that's for young people. But at some point, we'll get stuck in our evolution if we don't address the body on the physical form. If nothing else, our body just can't hold that high level of awareness like it needs to, that without shifting the energy, eating good foods, things like that. So I'm also doing a teacher training on nutrition for some yoga teachers coming up. That's a closed course. But if you want to do the online course with me, the foundation course that takes you through a 9-week series, that's also half off if you go to shiftcourses.com. And that's a 9-week series. You get videos every week, weekly meditation. And you go steps through step. And you also have some accountability. You can connect with me and some of my coaches. And so you have a guide along the way. It's nice to have friends along the way, right?
Yeah.
We can't do it ourselves.
And you work one-on-one with people as well, too, right?
Yeah.
Well, very cool, Aron. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
My honor. Thank you.
I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. piss because we have to stop. We don't have to stop. We could sit here forever and a day, but unfortunately life gets in the way at times. So I hope everybody enjoyed it, and go out and find all of Aron's stuff. We'll have it up on the episode when it comes up, and just have a beautiful, wonderful day.
Much love, Craig. Thank you. The greatest darkness hides in the light. An official yogi, withdrawing and disconnecting from the matrix. Yes, enlightenment. Let's go for it. Everything could be medicine. Everything could be poison. You just have to know how to use it.